Hey, it's Jason Cunningham and welcome back to Save My Business, the podcast dedicated to helping small and medium-sized business owners navigate through the proverbial shitstorm. And today's guest is one of my favourites, none other than the CEO of the Essendon Footy Club, the Mighty Bombers, Xavier Campbell. G'day, Xav. How are you, pal?
I'm good, Jace.
Welcome to Save My Business, pal. Thanks for joining us. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, why the hell have I got the CEO of the Essendon Footy Club on a podcast called Save My Business? But for mine, obviously, I'm a mad bomber, as you know. But secondly, I think there's so much that local or small to medium-sized business owners can glean from elite sporting clubs. And I want to start with you and your journey, if that's okay. And let's hope that I don't cross the boundary. But, mate, you're a South Australian boy. Is that right?
No.
No. Well, I fucked that up, hey? Didn't you play footy at Sturt?
Yeah.
I told you I don't do any research. Didn't you play footy at Sturt?
I did, but I was from Echuca. But I spent time in South Australia playing footy in university over there.
Yeah. Okay. And you won a premiership in the SANFL, is that right?
Yeah, but long time ago now, 2002.
Yeah.
At Sturt in the SNFL.
And what brought you back to Melbourne?
Well, I went and travelled overseas first. I spent time in Los Angeles and London.
Yep.
And I'd finished an economics degree and I probably had no intention to want to work in that field necessarily. The business of sport, I was passionate about that. I was really interested by that. And, you know, to come back and work in, the sporting capital of the world is Melbourne. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And, when I came back in 2004 or 5, whatever it was, I sort of pounded the pavement to try and find an opportunity in sport. It took me a long time. And I ended up finding a job with Octagon, a big global sports marketing company. And that's sort of started my journey many years ago. And
how did you find yourself at the Bombers?
Well, during that period, I'd actually met Travis Auld, who at the time, you would know Travis, who's now...
Gold Coast?
Yeah, he was at Gold Coast, now he's at the AFL,
Yeah,
obviously very senior at the AFL, really talented guy. Met him just through trying to find a role. They didn't have one at the time, ended up getting a job with Octagon, worked with another company, and then ended up at the Bombers 2009, so I've been there 11 years now, CEO for 7 years.
Tell me, Xav, there's no doubt, and stating the obvious, you've had a challenging tenure. Not necessarily of your doing, but walking into being a CEO when, mate, the football world had been belted. How did you deal with that?
Well, sort of, when I got asked to sort of become the key executive of the business, and it wasn't necessarily CEO straight away, it was COO, acting CEO. It was the end of 2013, and I was 33, I think, at the time, about to turn 34. So I was pretty young, but we were in the, clearly, in what you're referring to is the supplements issue, and we were right there. We were what, 9 months into that, with enormous uncertainty still surrounding the club. We had a coach that had been suspended. We had the ongoing ASADA investigation, no real clarity around timelines, all those sorts of things. So it was I guess it was daunting, but it was also when you sort of had the time to sit back and look at the opportunity as a whole. And when I've been an Essendon supporter my entire life, so I was very passionate about the brand and the club and the history. It was too good opportunity to refuse. And it has been. I mean, that probably occupied the first 3 or 4 years of my tenure as CEO, and the last year's been COVID, which has been intense for its own reasons. And I did an MBA the middle 2 years as well, at a business school overseas. So I probably haven't had a normal year. I'd love to hope that 2021 does deliver some normality, but that's in part the challenge of working in AFL. It's a unique dynamic landscape and there's always something there, and every club has its own challenges and nuances that they're dealing with at any point in time anyway.
Can I ask you, Xav, the experience that you went through during the supplement saga, I feel that might have put you in good stead to deal with the challenges that existed during lockdown and COVID. I mean, something outside your control. You didn't know when there was going to be an end date. It seemed to go on forever, and you were just thrown into it. Are the circumstances relatively similar?
Yeah, there are clearly parallels. Yeah, it's a good observation, and it sort of, in some respects, it's been hard. In some respects, it's been easier to navigate through. We talk about isolation. Isolation was the supplements issue because we were isolated. We're the only club that was going through it. Clearly, the passage of time probably meant that the competition was getting frustrated with Essendon because it was taking so long. But as you said, a lot of it was out of our control, and we really were fighting hard for the players to have a fair hearing. It was probably ultimately what we were trying to do. And then this time around, COVID is very different because we were all in the same position, and it wasn't just the AFL or sports and entertainment industry. It was across every single industry was affected in one way, shape, or form. So the ability to be able to pick up the phone, talk to other CEOs about the challenges of the broader business, not so much, and even the sports, the performance side, the football side, was a very different proposition than going through the first unique challenge, which was the ASADA issue.
And you're right, we were very isolated as a club, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, and not much more time at all actually, but I was working at SEN at the time, and even the media were against us and everyone was against us. One question that I've been dying to ask is, Abe, and I have this conversation with many business owners, and I have this conversation with the many voices that are going on in my head, is one of the biggest inherent dangers that exists for us as business owners, or people that are professionals, is that we often link our identity to our job or to our role. And I think there's some inherent dangers in that. Now, in your position, one would argue that that's amplified because the thing about, and I'm speaking from the outside looking in, but the thing about running a powerful footy club is you've got so many stakeholders. You've got the players, you've got their families, you got the members, you got the supporters, you got the AFL, you got the media, you got the broadcasters. There's so many stakeholders. How do you go from Xavier Campbell, CEO, Essendon Footy Club, bleeds red and black, to being Xavier the dad, Xavier the husband, and Xavier the mate? How do you do that?
Well, I think to your initial point, though, that the identity piece is very real, not just for CEOs, it's very much for the players. Think about the players.
Yeah.
They're very much their entire, right throughout their high school. Clearly, their last 3 or 4 years of high school, they're probably earmarked to be potential AFL draftees. They very much become Jason the footballer. That's his talent. The conversation is very much always about that. They then play their career. You'd love to think they're doing stuff outside of football to build capability in other industries and areas and knowledge, so that they, at the very minimum, they can leave football knowing the path they want to take.
Yeah.
But they are very much first and foremost the footballer, and trying to shift that identity is tough. And some people I think have done it really well. Job Watson, Job was an incredibly well-known footballer.
Yeah.
But there's a hell of a lot more to Job Watson than the footballer, and he probably really made a concerted effort to build that during his playing days, and that's probably helped him transition as well as anyone. For me, I think you always, you're probably the same. It's sort of when you're working in a role in an industry that's all-encompassing, and sport is, AFL certainly is, in the context of you can be in it at any hour of the day, you can be in the industry. So you can either be doing your work in the office, talking about it with a stakeholder, at home reading it online, or whatever. You can always be reading something new about it and learning more about it. And sometimes that can be unhealthy. Unhealthy in the sense of you start to overthink things probably, and unhealthy because you don't create step change in life to check back into your family and things like that. And at different points I've really struggled with that, particularly early on.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Yeah, and I took over as CEO on the 1st of January I was CEO, acting CEO, the 1st of January 2014. We had our first child 4 days before that.
Oh my God!
So that was that was very, very difficult to learn to be a father, to be a good support for your wife who's going through a really challenging, first child. It's bloody hard.
We forget about the second and third, but that first one...
Exactly.
I've got this rule that all my mates, I know their firstborn's name, the second and third, I wouldn't even have a clue. But anyway, I hope my second-born son's not listening to this. Hey, Xav, you've been very fortunate and you've had some amazing mentors throughout your career. And one would argue that you've been more fortunate than most to tap into some amazing people. And I know that, Paul Little played a big role in your development, and I don't know Paul, but I've been to his airport. I mean, a bloke's got his own airport, which I think is outstanding. I bumped into, I was sitting next to Murray Rance on a flight back from Vegas, and we got talking, and we spoke about footy and all that sort of stuff, and he's an SEN listener, and next minute he took me to the airport, and I got to see a different world. And Tell me what it's like to have the ability to tap into somebody like that who's a titan of industry, who's obviously a very passionate supporter, who's given a lot to the club, a lot more than anyone would actually ever know, and nor will he ever declare what he's done. But what's it like to have somebody like that, as during your formative years as a COO, going to CEO, what's that like to have a billionaire to look up to?
Yeah, well, I mean, Paul has been an excellent support and mentor in my career, as you rightly stated. He's a person though as well.
Yeah.
So he's got areas that he's got real expertise at, and he's got areas that he'll lean on you for. But I think you're very fortunate in this industry, unlike so many other industries where you can almost open. If someone supports your club, you can almost open any door and meet with that person. It's a very unique aspect of AFL, and that's across every single club.
Yeah.
Because people have this emotional, passionate connection to their football club.
That's what David Swartz would say to me, and I've known Ox for about 15 or 16 years now. And one of the things that he got told early doors, I think Gary Lyon was the one that said it to him, is make sure you get around to know your supporter.
Yeah.
And know your supporter base, because they're the ones that are going to open the doors for you. Dave, one would argue, sure, he had a little bit of an issue on the punt, but he's not a gambler anymore. And in actual fact, he's the ambassador for responsible gaming for the ALH group. But he's made a really successful transition out of footy. And he puts that down to not getting too ahead of yourself and understanding that it's the supporter base and the membership base that keeps the club alive. So one of the things that I find really intriguing about the AFL and sporting clubs, for most sporting clubs, is they are really strong at not listening to outside noise. Despite the fact that you could be on the front or the back page of the paper, or you could be on Footy Classified or whatever, they really are crystal clear on closing ranks and developing a game plan. And when I talk to business owners, I talk the importance of having a game plan. And the things that when I look at an elite sporting club, and let's take footy and let's take the Bombers, what I can see from an outsider looking in, although I'm a coterie member and I'm passionate about the club, but what I can see is that the club gets together, both off-field and on-field, and they develop a plan. And they spend a whole heap of time fine-tuning said plan. And let's start with the game plan. And the game plan might say, okay, we finished 12th, and next year we think it's conceivable that we can push between 6 and 9. And so our plan is to this. We're going to recruit this type of player, and this is the game plan we're going to play.
Yep.
And for a significant period of time, everybody learns said game plan and everybody knows their role in said plan.
Yep.
The next thing is that in this industry, there's consistent feedback. And in actual fact, the player demands feedback. How do I get better? How do I get stronger? How do I hold my position? What do I need to do to improve? And at every point in time, during training, during what we eat, and during game day, we've been fed feedback.
Yep.
Conversely, in business, often business owners don't have a plan. If they do, it's 5 years old. And if they develop a plan, they don't talk to anybody. And I just find that when I look at an elite sporting club, there's so much to learn. Can you share some of your insights? I know you've done an MBA and you've worked in other industries.
Yeah.
Can you share some of your insights about the development of the plan and the buy-in of the plan by the stakeholders, the players, and the playing group within the club?
Yeah. No, every year you want to win the premiership.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. And more than ever in the history of the game, we've seen some teams win the premiership from positions. When Richmond won in 2017, they had come from a position well down the ladder.
Bulldogs.
The Bulldogs did it the year before, 2016. And you sort of, not so much, this last year was just because of the nature of the way the competition was structured, it probably supported the more established, mature teams with established game plans. But things can happen. It's a very even playing field in sport, but you do have to be realistic about where you sit, and it starts with your list, things like that, and your list strategy is critical. That's not the only factor that's going to drive your performance. You can't rely on that, because clearly your coaching, your development, your recruiting, all of that ties in, and you have to be very honest with yourselves about that. But it's very easy to get caught up in the emotion. It's very easy to get caught up in a bad loss.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get caught up in a great win.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to step back I know for me, having discussions with the football guys, I normally wait to sort of 36 hours after a game because I know it'll be a really constructive discussion then. Because I know I won't be either here or here. I'll be where I need to be, somewhere in here, and it'll be much more productive discussion.
And sometimes safer after a loss.
Absolutely. But it goes both ways. It swings both ways.
Yeah.
And we, as footy clubs, we ride and we use that passion, and we use it when things are going really well to drive a lot of our key metrics and membership and all those sorts of things. And it can be hard to manage when people get really frustrated with poor performance. And we saw that, for our club, we saw that last year, and no one's happy with the performance. But there are differing. So my job as CEO and the head of football and we need to look at it sort of more objectively to say, all right, why? Where do we think we're going to get to? Set our goals in a realistic manner, and then step back from there. But be careful. You've got a plan. You've got to try and stick to that plan, and not let the outside noise impact that plan. And that's you're accountable to the board in presenting that plan and working to that plan.
How much involvement as CEO do you have in game plan?
Yeah, in terms of the on-field stuff.
Yeah,
minimal. I mean, it's not my expertise.
Yeah.
I mean, we are. Football clubs are very, very unique businesses in the sense that it's essentially split in two. You've got the administration, which is, it's obvious, you're talking all your revenue drivers, your finance, your admin operations, everything else and you've got a performance-based side of the business.
But do they report into you? Does the head of football report into you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're employing experts in their field. They've got a specialist. It doesn't mean, I'll sit on the list management.
Excuse my ignorance, right? So, how do you know if they're not doing a good job?
Well, my role is to help them formulate the strategy, and they've got to be clear around what that looks like and hold them accountable to the strategy. Just like sitting on list management, my job is not to sit there and go, Jace is a good player, he should be offered this amount of money or that contract, or we should recruit this player.
Yeah.
It's to take the names and the faces and the players out and talk about, it's a strategy, this is what it looks like, here's what the demographic you said we need as a list, here's the makeup. Well, how are we going against that strategy?
And see, that's where I reckon lies the dichotomy and the biggest challenge is because I think one of the things that the AFL as a collective has done really well in recent years is helping player post-football.
Yeah.
And the work that we do at footy clubs, a mate of mine, Chris Burnsy, works there in player welfare development.
He's a good man.
He's a good man, yeah. He'll tell you what a great footballer he was at St Bernard's too. No, he's a good man. But the work that we put into helping players make that transition, because that's a big challenge. I've met, in my role, a lot of players that, have played at the highest level, earning big bucks, and they see as an 18, 19-year-old kid, their mates that they went to school with are working at a supermarket, stacking the shelf while they're at uni, where these kids are on 80 grand and 150 grand and 200 and 400 grand and whatever. But then when their career's over at the age of 28 or 30 or 32, they go from 400 grand down to 60, pretty tough.
Yeah.
Whereas their mates are climbing the ladder. I think the AFL has done an amazing job with that, right? But then on the other side of the coin is we've got to, even though we're really good at people and managing people and helping them through their welfare, we've got to take the names off the faces, and it's a position. How do you juggle that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's the balance of how much support you give and then how much empowerment you give, because you do want them when they leave footy and on average your careers are sort of 5 or 6 years.
That's right.
And you make a really good point where the average player is not getting up to the average salary.
No, they're
normally.
not.
A little bit. It's just not the way it's skewed in terms of your list and how people are paid. So they are coming in earning, in comparison to their peers, good money. But it's not life-changing money in the sense it sets them up for life, because it's such a short period and it's not hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Well, it's not NBA income.
It's not NBA. The average salary in the NBA is what, $4.5 million.
Yeah.
You play 1 year. If you invested it properly, you're pretty well set up.
That's right.
You can't do that, and that's why really getting players to buy into the outside work stuff, the networking with the key contacts within the football club, just building that perspective. I would love at some point for the competition to be more bold in the sense of saying, right, you need to qualify to play, you need to have committed to a trade or study or work experience on a more formal setting. I would love to see that, but it's also a game that demands massive amounts physically.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do both.
I know the PA, the AFL Players Association, have partnered with the AFL Sports Ready program, and they do some things. Part of their EBAs, they don't play footy or have anything to do with footy on a Wednesday or a Thursday. And we've had a few of the kids come through and work here, and that's been great. And a couple of them have actually continued their career on at our organisation. But I want to talk a little bit more about the year that we've just gone through, right? And to understand the dynamics of the business case. And so a lot of us, the layperson sees it's all about winning premierships and all that sort of stuff, but we've got to stay financially viable. And a significant amount of our income, the footy club's income, it comes from the AFL and memberships and events. What was it like planning for that year around where we're going to be and all that sort of stuff, and are we going to be financially viable?
Well, I mean, ultimately, all of what you said underpins winning a premiership.
Yeah.
The goal of winning a premiership, because all of that, if you get it right, the investment goes into paying a full soft cap in your football department and paying your full total player payments in your salary cap. And getting really good talent to come in, and it's ultimately we're a not-for-profit. We're investing everything back into our football program to drive performance. Yeah. And unashamedly, our goal is to win our 17th premiership. Yeah. And it has to be, and it should be, and our members deserve and expect that.
We certainly do.
Yeah, but there's a lot to your point. Like last year, literally overnight, it felt like a sort of 72-hour period that we all went from driving at 90 kilometres an hour to we're down to 3 or 4 kilometres an hour. It felt like that, and every business went through it. Yeah. And classic learning is it's never as good, it's never as bad. If you take that philosophy, you'll make better decisions. But it felt pretty bad at that point in time, and we worked hard as a football club, and we're a football club first and foremost. Yes, there's a broader business, but we are a football club. We're about people, we're about our members, we're about our players, we're about our history and culture. But we had to make we've diversified our revenues, so we're not just relying on, being at the top of the ladder or the bottom of the ladder. We don't swing as much. We do swing because naturally there's a lot of revenues that are tied to performance. But we've got, country clubs, we've got gyms, we've looked at a whole range of other areas. But, COVID impacted every single one of our revenue lines, and that's daunting. Our revenue dropped 20-something million, 21 million, I think it was in the end. We had to make cost cutting of about 19.5 million, and that's hard because they are very challenging people decisions that we had to make as a footy club, and that's no one likes that stuff. But it's very much necessary to ensure that our core goal of winning a premiership, we stay true to that, and that's managing the finances and creating that stability was imperative.
Xavier, as wrong as this sounds, I rang up to get my membership and you couldn't get through, right? Leave a message and send an email and all that sort of stuff. And I got my membership kits for me and my boys, and my wife's a Carlton supporter. So me and my boys got sent to us at the end of the season, which I understood because our business, we had to let people go. We couldn't answer the phone. People were working from home, and I felt like everybody has been belted by this. Everybody's working from home. Everybody had to, and I know in the AFL the cuts that went through, and people that had to get let go. It did not miss anyone.
No.
Last year, it didn't miss anyone. Yet you'd see on the TV, and I think the AFL did an amazing job, and the clubs did an amazing job to get it off the ground. And it was wonderful, but we all got belted.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I talk to business owners about. So I'm a big proponent of the balanced scorecard. It's your people, your processes, and your customers that drive your financials. And when we talk about people, one of the things that we try to help our clients with is we try to help our clients create and cultivate that environment that's not only attractive enough for key people to come and join your organisation, but adhesive enough to hold on to them. Yeah. And we talk about culture and core values.
Yeah.
And one of the books that I've read is a book called Legacy, written about the New Zealand All Blacks, which I think is an amazing book.
Yeah, I've read that.
Can you talk to me about how you go about driving culture and what's a good, effective culture at the footy club? Yeah. And what do you do when you feel that there's some toxicity in the culture, and how do you stamp that out?
Yeah. It's a good point, and I'll talk in the context of where we are now, because it feels like 2020 with COVID, we were never more disconnected from our key stakeholders. So it didn't feel like a normal football club. Didn't feel like a normal football year for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And it wasn't predominantly. And I think we lost a connection to who we are a bit. And I think every club would say that.
Yeah.
You know, even probably Richmond is sort of, that would still be the hardest year that they've had to go through because of everything that COVID presented. Yet they won the flag. You know, it's tough work. But it's a Ben, as senior coach, Ben Rutten, has been big on this. Well, what is our culture going to be, and what's our legacy going to be, and what's this football club about? And he's really been determined to not redefine that necessarily, but reinvigorate it.
Yeah.
Because that's big to him. Sheeds did exactly the same thing when he came in the early 80s, and Ben and Sheeds have spoken a lot about that. Well, what's our identity going to be? As a team, as a playing team, you know, he wants us to be blue collar, hard-working, dependable, disciplined. And how's he reached that? He's sat down with Terry Danner and spoken to him about it. He's sat down with Tim Watson, and they're the ones that have helped inform.
Oh, so this is Truck saying we want to be blue collar.
This is where he wants to be. Right. Play blue collar. Are we a blue collar club? It's hard to say we're a blue collar club.
Yeah.
But on field, I bet you our members would love to see us be a blue collar team.
And so how does he? Okay, so he comes up with that strategy with, you know, obviously stakeholders like Terry Danaher and Timmy Watson and Kevin Sheedy and these sort of legends of the club. How does he then instill that culture within the playing group? Yeah,
so he's done it. There's a lot of different initiatives they've got in place at the moment, and part of it is actually educating the players and getting down and dirty into this is the history of Windy Hill. This is the history of McCracken family. This is like actually getting right back to it, so the players can attach themselves to that. You know, each player with your number, you ring a corresponding past player of the same number. Little things like that this year. Yeah. That is all about sort of reinvigorating that field. But equally, it's not just the players. Like we'll do the same thing with our staff. We're coming to our 150th anniversary next year. It's important that we are as well positioned to acknowledge and feel connected to our history as we ever have been, based on that. But equally, I think it sort of helps. It's a sort of like your north. Like that's where your
true north.
Exactly, that's the thing. So,
so what do you do, Xav? What do you do in a position where somebody's not buying into the culture? Yeah. How do you deal with those challenges? And I know that, you know, I speak to business owners all the time. They go, there's a problem with our culture. And I go, well, is there a problem with the culture or is there a problem with the leadership? Yeah. So how do you deal with a player or certain team members that aren't buying into the culture?
Well, I think at first, like, to take it back a step, I think there's a common perception, AFL, you're winning, you've got a great culture, you're losing, you've got a poor culture. Yeah. And that's just not right.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you can't just flick a switch and you win games of football and you've got a great culture. Being clear around what your vision is, being clear on the behaviours that you're actually going to reward and hold people accountable to, and then following through, and then creating a platform for honest feedback. Like that, it all sounds very simple. But if you don't do it, things will creep.
I think that the key word that I took from that was the behaviours piece. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily matter about the scoreboard in this sense around culture. It's around the behaviours. And this is one of the things that we like to talk about in our organisation. Is one of our guiding principles is that we allow each other to operate within our genius, but subject to hygiene, right? And that hygiene piece is very important. And that book, Legacy, I find it outstanding, particularly the notion around sweep the sheds, and that no one can look after an All Black like an All Black. And I remember watching basketball. You know, the kids are right into basketball. My boys are right into the NBA, and I love the NBA too. Grew up with Michael Jordan and Dominic Wilkins and all these sort of Isaiah Thomas and all that sort of stuff. But you know, I remember watching LeBron James, and it's not a good example because LeBron James does a lot of amazing things outside his circle with you know the charities he set up and stuff. But I remember he got off the bench and he took his tracksuit top and he just dropped it, and he put his hands in and how he does that with the chalk dust and stuff like that. I go, who does LeBron James think he is? I said to my son, Jack. He goes, Dad, he's the king. I go, I don't give a fuck who he is. He can pick up his own tracksuit top. And then I started to tell Jack about, the All Blacks and how they pick up the tape and all that sort of stuff. And, how it's an honour to receive Jonah Lomu's jersey, number 11, and him to say to, the guy he passed it on to, leave this jersey in a better place than you once inherited it. And I think that sort of stuff, and hearing what you're saying, that what Ben Rutten's trying to introduce around the culture and what we stand for as a footy club, and I think it's very important to understand where we've come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to, not just where we're going, because that vision is very important as well.
Yep. No, I agree with that.
Talk to me about COVID life, living in a hub, managing and controlling, and what a lot of people may not recognise is these elite athletes are 23, 24, 21. You got leaders, people thrust into a leadership position. Our centre-half back, Todd Ridley, wins the best and fairest.
Jordan Ridley.
Todd
Ridley played.
Used to play. He had blonde hair as well, Jordan Ridley. Sorry about that, Jordo. He wins after playing 24 games or something like that and becomes a leader. Dyson Heppel is a young leader.
Yeah.
They're still relatively young.
Yeah.
How do you instill more of a mature head on some young shoulders?
It's interesting, the hub. Back to your first question about what was the hub like. I mean, it was a really interesting experience, and a lot of people would have said to me in the last 3 or 4 months, "Oh, the hub must have been hard." The hub wasn't hard. I mean, in comparison to stage 4 lockdown, we were incredibly fortunate.
Yeah.
The fact we was A, still working, B, doing an environment like that. It was disappointing not to be doing it in front of the fans and having, as we spoke about, the stakeholders involved, from the club, they were so disconnected. That was challenging. But in the context of the overall landscape that the nation and the world was faced with at the time, we were incredibly lucky to get to that position.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and it's I saw it firsthand. We would have a staff briefing every week, and you had essentially you had a third of staff fully stood down. You had a third of staff working on reduced hours predominantly, and you had a third that were in the hub.
Yeah.
That's 3 incredibly unique dynamics. Groups, and they were bloody hard. The staff briefings were really hard last year, trying to manage what that was like. And it was very interesting because we were all going on that journey for everyone at Hub. We wanted to make sure everyone really had that perspective, because if you didn't, you're going to offend a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And you're not going to have that proper grasp on where we sat and how lucky we were to be in that position. And it's interesting because you talk about the leadership piece for those young guys. As hard as this year has been, as COVID has been for everyone, I think for 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, what a great time in their life to experience something like that. Great in the sense of the learnings that come from hardship like that, and hopefully the broader perspective they develop. How much do we all start to put so much more value on being able to go for a walk, or go to a restaurant, or just social interactions, or travel. We've got a lot more perspective, haven't we?
Haven't we?
Yeah, I know for me in the first lockdown, I'd never been more accessible at home. I don't think I'd really played a genuine role at home in terms of my, getting the kids to school or helping with schooling or making their lunches or cooking.
And it was good to be part of it.
It was excellent. It was one of the silver linings that came from it was that. And I think for a lot of us, having that flexibility with how we work, I'd love to think I still do a day at home or 2 every week. I think we'll probably talk about what that looks like moving forward. I don't want to give that up, and I don't want my staff or our staff or the groups have to give it up, because I think it's become too important. And
it's one of the things that I took away from lockdown. I was dead against. How there's early adopters. Those dudes that queue up to get the iPhone, the next release. They're sleeping overnight in sleeping bags and shit. I was like the second last bloke to have a BlackBerry, right? So I'm like the opposite of the early adopter, and I was always dead against. I wanted this delineation between my home life and my work life, and all of a sudden we were forced to. And like with everything that I'm late at adopting, I go, shit, this is not bad. So I'd wake up and I'd have a workout in the morning with Ange. We'd go for a walk, lift a few weights, do whatever. I'd start work off at home. Our twins were doing year 12, so they were in a hurry to say, Dad, piss off.
What a tough year.
Yeah. But and all I do all day long, look, let's be honest, I just move paper from one side of a desk to another. But I'm often on the phone and talking very loudly, and they were keen to get me out of there. But now I can see that ability for us to almost have that work-life balance, because now it's normal to work from home for the start of the day, or work at home every Thursday or whatever. And we were lucky in a sense that we made a decision to become an output-focused business as opposed to an input-focused business. And what I mean by that is we removed the requirement to work from 8 till 5:30 or whatever. It was more about what result can you produce. And so I think we took a lot out of that. So tell me, obviously we've all had more Zooms than we wanted to. what does the new world order look like for you and your staff and your off-field staff in particular? Because it's hard to run a Zoom footy training. But what does the off-field world look like for the staff at the Essendon Footy Club?
Well, again, we've got two very different sides of the club.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about the footy side now. It is, to your point, it's pretty difficult to work from home when you're running a footy program.
Yeah.
You can't do it. But where the AFL has probably realised is that do we need to have them training, doing a 3.5 month pre-season, or a 4 month pre-season? I think that's going to finish, and you're going to see a much more condensed program with a lot more empowerment. A bit like we're doing with our staff now and our administration side about. All right, it's your job to keep your fitness program up to a certain level so you can enter the program when it formally starts at an appropriate level. Yeah. And I think that we'll see a lot more of that. I think we certainly, in talking with our footy staff, there'll be a longer leave period that allows them to support them with other endeavours that they want to explore. Because again, once you get into the cut and thrust of football, you're in it. Yeah. You're in the industry, and it's very unique. And sometimes I think people find it hard to work out, well, what's my next step? Because they will be invariably they want to get out at some point. Yeah. And understanding, well, what skills are transferable, what's not. I think it's good for people to have that variety. I'm a really big believer in that. In terms of the broader club and the administration, I think it's very hard to see. We're at Tullamarine, great facility, driving against traffic, but it's still 45 minutes probably on average for each person to get out in the morning. Yeah. 45 minutes of a night. Yeah. It's not palatable to think that people are going to do that 5 days a week moving forward after you've had a complete stop. So I think the dial up is going to be as difficult as the dial down was. Yeah. So gradually building up, and probably we're forced to do it because of capacity limits and things like that, is probably, it's a good way to do it. Not ideal because a lot of people do want to be in the office. But I'd say, for us as a business, we're probably, as a footy club and the administration side, it's going to be we want you in the office at least 2 days a week. But if you want to be in 5, that's up to you. Yeah. Those 2 days are about connection and, staff briefings, come down, let's watch, come in on the main training day, let's watch training, let's feel why we're involved in the footy club, be close to the team, let's do our big presentations as a group, have your team meetings. But the other 3 days, just flexibility.
Well, that's one of the things that we discovered that our organisation missed was that incidental collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we, as a partnership group, there's 5 of us that are partners in this business, and we were never more connected than we have been because we put 2 regimented Zoom catch-ups on a Tuesday and a Thursday to catch up and have conversations. But what we discovered was that incidental collaboration that accidentally happens. Or has anyone worked on a property developer? Or has anyone, those sort of conversations didn't happen. And when he allowed us to come back in, people were queuing up, to get back into the office and see their mates from work. Even the conversations around footy tips on a Monday. And I can't believe I picked Collingwood and all that sort of stuff. And, Supercoach and all those conversations were sort of lost. So, Xavier, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you this question. You've been touted as a potential replacement for Gil McLachlan. And you've obviously heard that noise. Obviously, that's just me on Big Bomber. No. A little bit of bias there. But no, your name has come up in circles. And, you can answer this or not. But you're a lifelong Mad Bomber supporter who's got a dream job. Sure, there's been a couple of circumstances along the way that weren't ideal. Do you ever think about what the future might hold for you, or are you living in the present?
No, I think, you'd be silly not to. Who doesn't? Yeah. I could easily give you the standard line and say, I'm taking it one day at a time. But I love the job. I love working for Essendon, but also there'll be a point where, I won't be right for Essendon, and there always is a point that comes to that.
Well, even the great Kevin Sheedy, 27 years.
Exactly. And there's, I've got plenty on my plate now. There's, certainly the club isn't right now where we want it to be and where I want it to be. Yeah. 12 months ago we had record membership. We just finished finals. We sort of announced the debt-free. We had the facility expansion on foot. We had a succession plan in place. Versus end of last year, and now with COVID, we're trying to reset the broader business model, and from a football perspective, we've lost some players that we probably wanted to keep. Yeah. But if you don't want to be here, that probably makes sense.
But we got 6, 7, and 8.
We've got some great picks, but we've got a younger demographic, and that's a fact. So, but building, hopefully, it means we're in a position to build a more sustainable football program to raise each year our performance, to your point before. And that's what we want to see. We want to build and build and build, because we don't want to be 8th or 7th on the ladder. We want to be a premiership team.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, for me, I love the job. There's still plenty to do. You know, what the future holds will be. Doing an MBA is excellent because it broadens your skill set, it broadens your interests, it helps enhance your capability to do your job better. But I don't have any plans, and I am very focused on this next couple of years at Essendon.
Xav, from the outside looking in, it's a very cutthroat business. The supporter base definitely hate the opposition, and clubs go at each other like a bull at a gate. But I'd be surprised if you didn't collaborate with other clubs and have conversations with other CEOs. And this is one of the things that I love about the industry that I'm in. As accountants, when we get together a couple of times a year at different conferences, it's great to share war stories with other people in public practice and what do you guys do well and all that sort of stuff. Does much of that go on? Is there a collective where the CEOs or the administrative group get together and have conversations? Do you share ideas?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we meet probably 3 or 4 times a year, and we do. Every club CEO comes to a meeting with the AFL executive, and we talk through sort of formally with the structure around the key industry issues and things like that. Probably COVID triggered a level of collaboration that I hadn't seen in my 7 years as a CEO. Naturally, because a lot of what we were discussing we weren't competing on. You know, it wasn't like a competitive advantage or disadvantage you were trying to create from the situation. It was actually, and it wasn't survival. I know, it's Save My Business podcast. It's never been about saving Essendon. It's about, but the competition has had to go through massive material restructure, and we've had to make huge changes to get through this period. But this year, and there will be, I've had 4 or 5 CEOs I probably speak to very regularly about, because we are still navigating through an uncertain time. And as much as we think the vaccines are positive, it's not the end game. It's not going to necessarily straight away does it provide a line in the sand. We're going to still have to deal with this through the year, which is going to require a flexible mindset. We have to be more efficient as a business, and to do that, collaboration and developing economies can sometimes be the answer, and there's different opportunities we're exploring across different clubs in that respect. But when it comes to the football performance side, clearly it's a bit of a no-go, because it's sort of, you are trying to find that competitive advantage, and when you want to be ruthless in your pursuit of that, and you want to protect that at all costs. But on the other side, we've got to think differently about how we do our business there and grow our business to better invest into our football program. Mate,
talking about thinking differently, I'm often talking to business owners where at times we get caught up in what's best practice in our industry. Right? And I think there can be a lot to learn from drawing best practice from other industries. If I look at the customer service piece and some of the businesses in hospitality, how well they do it. And these are some of the things that I'm trying to introduce into our organisation. Where do you, as a footy club, do you look to other industries to glean best practice, and how can you improve your business? And can you share some examples?
Yeah, I think that the best example right now on foot is, so we're trying to be more efficient as a business. We're trying to be more productive as a business, on the business side particularly, because we've just reduced our head count by 35%. We've still got uncertainty to navigate through. So things I really think we'll get to a point where we really, as a industry, we'll embrace things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, because it'll help us make, on both sides of the business, it'll help us better serve and target membership growth and things like that. But also on a football side, there'll be, with this increased focus on injuries and concussion, all those sorts of things, there'll be diagnostic sort of progression that will get us to a point where we can better forecast when you are likely to have an injury and things like that. And I think that's now starting to come to the head, and I'd love to think that we could do more in that space, and that probably takes a collective of clubs, even though there's a bit of a competitive element on that side. There's a cost prohibitive element too. That's
right. Well, we share the love.
Yeah, but I think that's the mindset that you have to embrace. That we have to think differently, and I think there's opportunities there without doubt for us to get to that point.
I haven't got too much to go, but I got a couple of important questions. The first is AFLW. I've got to tell you that I've loved watching it this year. I think the standard is through the roof. And the footy club that I love, along with the Bombers, is the Pascoe Vale Footy Club, which is where I played footy there. I was chairman of the club, and I love the organisation, and we were pioneers in women's footy. I mean, we had our first side 10, 12 years ago and won a couple of flags and all that sort of stuff. What's Essendon's position on having a women's side? When will that happen, if at all? And what's your take on not only importance for the collective, but also the importance to Essendon Footy Club? Because one of the things that I love what it's done is it's taken football to be a game that boys play to a game that everyone can play.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a huge priority for us as a footy club. So we have a VFLW team, and we have for the last few seasons now. We've every intention to get an AFLW team as quickly as we can. We're working very close with Hawthorn, who don't have a team as well.
Yeah.
We're jointly lobbying the AFL to sort of get that licence sooner rather than later. I'd love to think that 2022 is realistic for us.
Is there a reason why they haven't issued another licence?
Well, I mean, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, it's a balance between the standard of the competition, bringing in so many, diluting the talent, all those sorts of things. Personally, I don't think that stands up as much when you consider that the talent coming through. I mean, you see, we had the Brownlow medalist wins it from as a first-year player a couple of years back. I mean, imagine if that happened in the men's side, this wouldn't happen. But they're very different points of their business cycle.
Yeah.
And the talent coming through is through the roof. So it's super exciting. And to the point you sort of made, like having that aspiration across the entire competition, all 18 clubs, where young girls can attach themselves to a female football star is incredibly important. Incredibly important. So we made a massive decision very early during COVID that we would continue with that facility expansion. We were about a third of the way through, and that was a $22 million expansion to the existing $30 million building we put out there, the hangar that's out there. It's amazing. Yeah. And when it opens, this new piece, it'll be even more amazing. But it's central to that is women's change rooms. Yeah. And women's change rooms are probably more enhanced than the men's change rooms.
Well, they are. We had to do the same thing at our footy club. You know, when we got a significant grant from the state, federal and also local government, as well as Bendigo Bank's a massive supporter of our club. And because women shower differently and, all that sort of stuff. Xav, two quick ones before we go. The last one's an easy one. The next one is, we were heavily involved in esports at the footy club, and that's no longer. Can you just talk to me about that experiment and how that went?
Well, I mean, I want us to be bold. I want us to think differently and try and find ways to actually grow our revenue base and to diversify. So that we dabbled in esports. We also explored the potential of an NBL team, things like that. Hawthorn did that. A couple of other teams, I think, did that as well. Yeah. And we'll keep doing it because we have to grow. It's another way of not just investing, it's growing your supporter base, it's growing your revenue. Like, it's a different way to think about it. Esports presented us with an opportunity there. Hard in this market. I found it hard in this market. Like, we really needed to play on a global level if you really wanted to. Like, we grew the enterprise value of the team and we made a profit that way. Yeah. But it's a costly venture unless you're in through Asia, you're winning League of Legends, you're progressing to Asia, it became more difficult. Yeah. And then the argument that you focus on your core business and things like, I just don't. We're always focusing on core business. Yeah. We have 45 people in our football program. It's now unfortunately about 30 people because of COVID, who aren't focusing on esports, who aren't running our fitness centre, who aren't doing any of those sorts of things, who are wholly and solely focused on that, and they always will be. Yeah. And I think there's an obligation on the other side that we've got to think differently about how we grow the business, grow the supporter base, grow revenues, and we'll continue to do that. And it was a great experience. We learned a lot from it. It didn't hurt us massively, and we'll continue to do it.
Yeah. Okay, final one. Where the Bombers finish in 2021?
Well, I tell you what I'm looking for. We want a specific position. I want to see us play a clear game style. I'd love to see if we find 5 or 6 players that you and your kids can attach yourselves to, and you think, wow, they're coming through. Yeah. And anything's possible. Anything's possible. We're always aiming to win premierships, and we're always aiming to play finals. Yeah. So we'll see, Jace.
Well done, Xavier. Thanks for your time, pal.
Good to see you. Thanks for getting me on the podcast.